day of Chodesh Shvat. We are learning the 94th Amud of Maseches Pesachim at Tzadik Daled Amud Beis, where the Gemara is going to introduce us to some interesting machloksim between the Chachmei Yishal and the Umas Ha'olam with regards to the way that the world physically operates. We are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines from the top of the page, Tzadi Daled Amud Beis, where the Gemara begins at the beginning of the line, Tanu Rabbanan. The Chachamim taught as follows: Chachmei Yishal Omrim, the Jewish sages tell us, Galgal Kavua, that the Galgal, the sphere, is fixed in place, Umazalos Chazrin, and the mazalos move through them. Now, just to explain very, very simply, from our perspective, this whole conversation is going to sound a little bit strange. We know that the Earth rotates on its axis and that the Earth revolves around the sun on an annual basis, and that the constellations of the stars are far out into space, and that our solar system is all spinning around it, and therefore at different points in time of the year we will see, as the Earth orbits around the sun, we will see different constellations rising and setting in the night sky. But all of this was not known to the ancient world, exactly how the movements of the spheres and planets worked, and the way that Chazal described it, and the way that the Umas Ha'olam described it in the days of Chazal, was that there were certain spheres that were in place that things moved in and moved through. Practically speaking, Chazal already described the Shiva Kachvei Lechet, that there are 7 stars that move through the constellations. That's the sun, the moon, and the 5 closest planets, meaning excluding planet Earth, that all of those could be seen as moving through the celestial sphere of the night sky. And the machlokas thus is as follows: that the Chachmei Yishal say the Galgal is kavua, that the sphere in which the constellations exist, that is fixed in place, that the space itself isn't moving. Umazalos chashrim, but the mazalos, the constellations, they are moving through the night sky. They rise and they set. The Chachamim of the nations of the world explain, no, Galgal chozer, that the entire plane of the night sky is moving. Umazalos kvun, but the stars themselves are fixed into that night sky, into that sphere, and thus the whole thing is moving. Okay, Amar Rebbe says the following: Tshuva Divrem. We have a refutation of the perspective of the Chachmei Umas Ha'olam, which is that Ma'olam lo matzinu agala b'darim v'akra b'tzafon, that we've never seen egla b'darim, that's Taurus, in the south, and we have never seen Scorpio in the north. That none of those have ever changed, which tells us that the Galgal is somewhat fixed in place, and that there is some kind of predictable movement of the constellations that is not due to the fixed placement of the celestial sphere, but that they move in accordance with a particular pattern. Tosfos here points out here that the top Tosfos on the page, it says Tosfos that it has to be that the Iglo Agala that we're talking about here and the Akrav that we're talking about here is not what we normally refer to as Taurus and Scorpio, because that would be against the Gemara in the beginning of Rosh Hashanah, Yud Aleph and Beis, Ein Shom Tim Sahar Ben Achas. But we're going to move on, just pointing out that it might be that there are other constellations that have similar names. I saw that in one translation that maybe it's Egla, meaning Taurus, or Agala, meaning wagon. So there's definitely what to work out with that. Okay, says the Gemara. Maseches of Acha bar Yaakov, says Rav Acha bar Yaakov as follows. Maybe both of these perspectives are incorrect. V'dilma butzina de reichaya. Maybe it's like the butzina de reichaya. It's like the blades of a millstone. Inami, or alternatively, Kitzinar Dadasha, like the hinges of a door. Meaning, in both of these cases, what you're talking about is not that you have independent moving objects, but, and this is in fact probably closer to the way that we understand the physics of it today, is that there are relative positions that all orbit around a singular spot. So, for example, you have the blades of a windmill or the spokes of a of a of a grain mill, or the door that is on a hinge. That the door itself moves about the hinge, but the hinge itself stays in place. That there is some orbital point in the middle, which is true, I think, physically today. That it's not entirely true that the Earth revolves around the sun. It is rather that the sun being considerably more massive, the center of gravity between the two of them is much closer to the sun, but the sun is also orbiting around the point of gravity between the Earth and the sun, and thus they are relatively orbiting each other to a certain extent. And this is Butzina de Rechaya or Tzner de Dasha, at least the way that I understand this Gemara ad kan. Says the Gemara as follows: Chachmei Yisrael, the Jewish sages say, "B'yom chama mahalechas lamata min harakia," that during the day the sun is traveling below the rakia, below the firmament, whatever that means. Uvalayla lamala min harakia, and at night it is above the firmament. Meaning, when it passes through the ovid rakia, like we discussed in the previous Amud, when it travels through the over harakia, what ends up happening is that it then crosses over into lamala min harakia, and that's why it is invisible to the earth. And the non-Jewish sages maintain, but yet during the day, during the day, the sun is traveling below the rakia, that's that sphere that the sun is just below. And at night it is below the ground, below the earth, which is probably closer to the way that we understand it. Like the Chachmei Umas Ha'olam. Says the Gemara, in fact, the fact that which is intuitive to our scientific understanding today is also the opinion of Rabbi. Rabbi says, I think that the Chachmei Umas Ha'olam got it better than us. They understood it better than us. And I'll give you a proof to it. It says, because during the daytime, the springs, natural springs, are cool. And at night they get hot, meaning that the sun travels underneath the earth and it heats up the water sources that are underneath it. And that's why at night hot springs are hot, and during the day well springs are cool. Okay. Tanya says the Gemara as follows, quoting from the Brisa, Rav Nasan teaches us, during the summer months, the sun travels at the height of the rakia, at the highest point. That's why the whole world gets hot during the summer months. But the Mayanas, the well springs are cool, because the well springs, the entry points of the well springs are far out of the yishuv, and therefore the sun is high up, and therefore the world where people are gets heated, but the sources of the well springs are not heated by the sun. But in the rainy season, the sun is much lower in the sky, and therefore it doesn't heat up the world as much. But the well springs do get hotter, Rashi points out, because the opening of the well springs are towards the edges of the horizon, and therefore the sun is heating up those areas more. Again, how this ties up to modern science today is an interesting question that requires a lot more Ian. The Rabbanan said as follows: the sun travels in four paths, meaning there are four main highways that the sun takes. And these are Nisan, Iyar, and Sivan during these 3 months of the year, from the beginning to the beginning of spring till the beginning of summer. It is up in the mountains. You see that it's the sun is traveling through the mountains in order to melt the snow caps. Tammuz Av and Elul, these 3 months of the year, which is the summer months going into autumn. Ma'aleches b'yishuv. It is in the yishuv. It is in the most the largest establishment, the largest settlement of people. Why? Kedei levashel saperos, in order to ripen fruits. That's what the sun is doing there. Tishrei Mar Cheshvan and Kislev. Tishrei through Kislev. You see that the Cheshvan is called Mar Cheshvan in the Gemara. Tishrei, it's got nothing to do with the fact that it's bitter. That's the name of the month. Tishrei Mar Cheshvan and Kislev. These 3 months of the year. Mahalechas b'yomim. The sun is traveling over the seas. Kedei liyovesh es hanaras, in order to dry up the banks of the rivers. ליובש es naras tevet shvat adar ve'adar mahalechas b'midbar sheloi liyovesh es hazraim. Tevet shvat and adar, the sun is traveling through the desert, so that it is not going to dry up the seeds, and that way things are going to be able to grow. Meaning, the sun travels exactly how HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants it to, so that everything grows the way that it's supposed to grow. Okay. Adkan, the science, astronomy, and astrology of the Amud, and the Gemara now quotes back in our Mishnah. The Machlokes where Rabbi Eliezer tells us that you are called derech rechaika if you are anywhere outside of the stup of the Azhar of the Beis Hamikdash. Rabbi Eliezer Amir me iskupas v'chulei. Says the Gemara of Avagav Dematzi Ayil. It seems to be that you are called derech rechaika even if you could have gone inside of the Beis Hamikdash. You're standing one step outside of the Beis Hamikdash. You are called derech rechaika. You're a potter from bringing Korban Pesach and potter from Karis. That's incredible. We don't say to him, Kuma Ayil, get up, go offer your Korban Pesach. You are 2 steps away from the Beis Hamikdash. V'atanya, we have a brayso that says Yehudi Orel Shleimal, a Jew who is uncircumcised, that chose not to get a bris milah, onish karis. Rabbi Eliezer himself says that he gets an onish karis for failing to get himself a bris milah in order to be able to bring Korban Pesach. It's interesting that the word Yehudi apparently was added in by the censors. It used to say Orel Shleimal, but the word the Dukei Sofrim points out that Yehudi Orel was added in by Christian censors to make sure that it's only a Jew that is uncircumcised that is considered to be cut off. But nevertheless, Yehudi Orel Shleimal onish karis gets karis. That's the point. That's what Rabbi Eliezer is saying. So Rabbi Eliezer is saying you should have gotten yourself a bris milah, and that's why you're going to be chayv karis. Yeah. So why doesn't Rabbi Eliezer say to you, you could have walked into the Beis Hamikdash? In fact, you should have, and then you would be able to offer your Korban Pesach. How come you're not chayv karis for that? Amar Abaye explains as follows: Derech hachaika latar ve'in derech hachaika latame. Now, we have 2 different dinim here. Derech hachaika is a unique chiddush. Derech hachaika means, and we saw this in the previous dapim, the derech hachaika means that if you are distant, that is a fundamental ptur. You are not chayiv in bringing Korban Pesach if you are b'derech hachaika. The same way that if you are tamei, you are not able to bring Korban Pesach, regardless of where you are. Says the Gemara, Rava Amar Rava says tonight, it's a machlokes tanaim. The Tanya Rabbi Eliezer says Nemar richuk makom b'Pesach v'nemar richuk makom b'Maiser. That the Torah describes richuk makom in 2 places. Richuk makom, distance, is recorded with regards to Pesach, that you're far away, and richuk makom is also discussed by the Torah with regards to the mitzvah of Ma'aser Sheni. The din is that in years 1, 2, 4, and 5 of the Shemitah cycle, meaning every year there's not Shemitah, year 3 or year 6, you are chayiv to bring 10% of what you yield from your field to Yerushalayim. What about ki yerchak mimcha makom? If it's too far, so then then you can exchange for money. Then you can exchange it for money, and you can go to the place that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has chosen, and then you can exchange that money for food to eat inside of Yerushalayim. Okay, so and the din is that as long as you're outside of Yerushalayim, you can exchange the money, and if you're inside of Yerushalayim, that is called in the makom. So just as there, richuk makom is referred to as outside of the place that you can eat it. At can. So to here, chutz la'achilasa. It is also outside of the place that you can eat it. Meaning, this is 2 days within the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Are we talking about that you called derech rechaika if you are outside of Yerushalayim or outside of the Azara? Is it dependent on eating the Korban Pesach? And that is the first opinion within Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda, Omer Mishum Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, chutz la'asiyasa. No, it means outside of the place that you can bring the Korban Pesach, meaning that it's not the place of eating it, but it's the place that the din is going to be effective of being able to shecht it, and both of them are trying to define it from the same source of Richuk Makom with regards to the Chiyuv of Maser Sheni. Says the Gemara as follows: Kaman Alsa Ha Da'amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Rabbi Yosef. Whose opinion is it? That which was said by Rabbi Yitzchak bar Rabbi Yosef, b'tmeim, with regards to tmeim halach achar reiv ha'imim azara. When you're trying to figure out whether you have a majority of people that are Torah, a majority of people that are Tameh, can this Korban Pesach be brought in a state of Tahara, in a state of Tumah, or can it can it only be brought in a state of Tahara? So you have to calculate what's the majority of the Jewish people. And then the question is, well, okay, who's considered to be part of this number that we are calculating whether or not there is a majority? Says this Brisa, you have to go according to the majority of people that are in the Azara, that are in the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash. Come on, whose opinion is this? Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda. This is the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda. The way that he understood Rabbi Eliezer, that it is defined as people that are inside of the Azara. I had a question on this because we had learned before that there are 3 different groups that are included in the Azara, and they closed the Azara between each one. And maybe it was a shadow of the miracles or not miracles, whether the doors closed or not. How would you calculate? Is it possible that you would have a split Korban Pesach based on the 3 groups? That one group would have Reiv Tmeim? That would be a difficult thing to ascertain. But in that case, how would you figure out who are the Reiv or not the Reiv with regards to Korban Pesach? Maybe it would be defined by the first group. But either which way, it's here. So if anybody has suggestions, please feel free to let me know. I haven't had a chance to take a look, but maybe Shabbos will have an opportunity. Says the Gemara going further. Amar Lai Rabbi Yossi lefichach, says Rabbi Yossi. Therefore, what's the therefore? Therefore, where the pasuk says derech rechaika, it has a dot on top of the hay. That's indicative of the fact that is a limiting factor. Tanya, we have a brayso that's as follows: Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says derech, from the fact that the pasuk says derech, rechaika lachem ala derechem shemeh ani mahalich shnaim o shlosh yamim. Derech sounds like it's a journey of 2 or 3 days. So Omer, when the pasuk says uva derech loyal, that he wasn't on a journey, may is kubas hazar v'rachutz kar derech. That tells me that we have a limiting factor. With derech loyhaya, that the person was not on a derech, that tells me that it was from the doorstep of the Beis HaMikdash of the Azara and outwards. That's called a derech. And anybody that is with derech loyhaya means that he was not outside of the Beis HaMikdash, and that is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach. We'll continue with the next Mishnah on Tzadi Hey Amud Aleph. We'll carry on before Shabbos, hoping that everybody has had a good week and a good yeshiva break for those that had a little bit of time off. And Be'ez Hashem, looking forward to learning with you tomorrow and on Shabbos as we continue with these fascinating halachas. Enjoy and do some chazara on all of these sugyas. There's a lot to see. Have a wonderful night.